Have you ever truly stopped to ask yourself the most fundamental question of your existence? Not what you do, not who you love, not what you own, but what is this awareness that is experiencing it all? What is that silent, constant presence behind your eyes, the inner voice that is listening to my words right now? That spark, that intimate sense of I am, is what we call consciousness. And for as long as we have been self-aware, we have been haunted by the ultimate enigma. Where does it go when we die? For centuries, this question belonged to the realms of philosophy and religion. But today, a revolution is underway. Neuroscience, quantum physics, and first-hand human experience are converging on this ancient mystery, and the answers they're uncovering are more profound, more challenging, and infinitely more hopeful than we ever dared to imagine. Modern science, in its quest for empirical certainty, has long offered a simple, if somewhat bleak, answer. Consciousness is a product of the brain. It's a symphony played by 86 billion neurons firing in a complex electrochemical orchestra. When the concert hall, the brain shuts down, the music simply stops. The symphony is over. The lights go out. End of story. But is it truly that simple? This perspective, while neat and tidy, stumbles on what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Think about it. We can track the electrical signals in the brain when you see the color red. We can map the neural pathways that are activated. But why do those physical processes create the subjective, internal, private feeling of redness? Why doesn't it just register as data, like a computer processing a color code? Why is there an experience at all? Why does a loving touch feel warm and comforting, and not just like a pressure sensor being activated? This fundamental puzzle, the gap between the physical brain and the subjective mind, is the crack in the door through which a universe of other possibilities shines. It forces us to ask a more radical question. What if the brain doesn't create consciousness? What if, instead, it acts more like a highly sophisticated antenna or a biological radio receiver? What if consciousness is a fundamental signal broadcast throughout the universe, and our brain is simply the device that tunes into a specific frequency, creating the individual personality we call you? If that's the case, then what happens when the radio breaks? The music doesn't stop. The broadcast continues. It's only the local reception that has ended. This uncertainty, this profound and thrilling unknown, is our starting point. We are about to embark on a journey to the very edge of human understanding, to explore the final moments of the brain, the nature of reality itself, and what might happen when your personal awareness dissolves back into the cosmos. Forget everything you think you know. The mystery of what happens after death is not a question about an ending, but about the true nature of consciousness itself. For decades, the medical and scientific definition of death has been clinical and abrupt. The heart stops pumping blood. Within about 30 seconds, the brain, starved of oxygen, ceases its electrical chatter. An electroencephalogram, or EEG, which tracks the brain's electrical waves, goes flat. A straight line. From the outside, it looks like a switch has been flipped. A machine has been unplugged. The light of consciousness has been instantly extinguished. This image has shaped our modern perception of death. It's a binary event, an instantaneous transition from on to off, from being to non-being. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, in those final moments, something extraordinary happens inside the brain? Recent, groundbreaking research is revealing that the transition from life to death is far from instantaneous. It's not a switch being flipped, but a slow, majestic sunset, complete with a final, stunning burst of light. In studies conducted on both animals and, more recently, on humans who have passed away while connected to an EZ, scientists have detected a truly astonishing phenomenon. In the moments after the heart has stopped, just as the brain is about to shut down, it doesn't just quietly fade to black. Instead, it roars to life. It unleashes a massive, highly organized surge of high-frequency brain waves known as gamma waves. Now, Gamma waves are not just random noise. In a living, healthy brain, they are associated with the highest forms of consciousness: intense focus, memory recall, meditation, and the binding of different sensory inputs into a single, coherent experience. They are, in a sense, the brain waves of profound insight and integrated awareness. To find a powerful, coherent burst of these waves at the very threshold of death is staggering. It's like a symphony orchestra at the end of its final performance, playing its most complex and beautiful piece of music in the final seconds before the hall goes dark. What could this final flare of neural activity represent? Scientists speculate that this could be the biological engine behind the profound and vivid experiences reported by those who have been revived from clinical death. This surge could be the brain's final, desperate attempt to make sense of its existence, a last act of creation where memories, emotions, and self-awareness are woven together into a single transcendent tapestry. Imagine it from the inside. As the external world fades away, your internal world could be lighting up with an intensity you've never known. This isn't a simple power-down sequence. It is a process, a gradual and structured event. The sunset analogy becomes incredibly apt. A sunset isn't just the disappearance of light. It's a dynamic transformation of the sky. Colors deepen, the atmosphere shifts, and just before the sun vanishes, it can cast its most brilliant, far-reaching rays across the horizon. This research fundamentally changes our understanding of the dying process. It suggests that consciousness may not just taper off. It may actually spike, becoming more coherent and lucid in the moments before it fades. The boundary between life and death is not a hard line, but a mysterious, transitional space, a space of unknown duration and extraordinary potential, where the brain performs its last and perhaps most meaningful act. It forces us to wonder, what is it like to experience that final sunset of the mind? To even begin to speculate about the fate of consciousness after death, we first have to grapple with the monumental question of what it is in the first place. Is it a ghost in the machine? A soul temporarily inhabiting a body? Or is it nothing more than the hum of our biological hardware? Neuroscience and philosophy have proposed several compelling, yet radically different theories. The dominant view in modern science is called emergentism. The idea is that consciousness emerges from the complex interplay of simpler, non-conscious components. The analogy often used is that of wetness. A single molecule of HO is not wet. It doesn't have the property of wetness. But when you gather trillions of these molecules together under the right conditions, the property of wetness emerges. You can't point to a single molecule and say, that one is the wet one. Wetness is a collective, holistic property of the system. From this perspective, consciousness is the wetness of the brain. A single neuron isn't conscious. It's a simple biological switch. But when you connect 86 billion of them in the extraordinarily complex network of the human brain, the phenomenon of subjective awareness emerges from that complexity. It's a beautiful and elegant theory, but it comes with a stark implication. If consciousness is an emergent property of the brain as physical structure, then when that structure dissolves, consciousness must necessarily end. When the water evaporates, the wetness is gone. But this is not the only way to think about it. Other theories challenge this brain-centric view, suggesting that we may have it completely backward. One of the oldest and most mind-bending of these is Panpsychism. Panpsychism proposes that consciousness is not a special property that arises only in complex biological organisms. Instead, it is a fundamental and ubiquitous property of the universe, present in all matter. According to this view, an electron, a quark, or a photon possesses a tiny, rudimentary spark of proto-consciousness. This isn't to say that a rock is thinking or a table feels pain. Rather, the building blocks of reality have a primitive form of inner experience. In this framework, the brain does not create consciousness out of non-conscious matter. Instead, it acts as a complex amplifying and organizing system. Like a lens that gathers scattered, invisible light and focuses it into a coherent, powerful beam, the brain takes the universe's background hum of proto-consciousness and organizes it into the rich, high-fidelity awareness that you and I experience. If this is true, the death of the brain doesn't mean the end of consciousness, but the dissolution of a complex, localized pattern of it. The focused beam of light dissipates, but the light itself remains everywhere. A more modern and scientifically rigorous theory that points in a similar direction is the Integrated Information Theory, IIT. Developed by neuroscientist and psychiatrist Giulio Tononi, IIT suggests that consciousness is not exclusive to biology, but is a measurable property of any system as interconnectedness and complexity. IIT proposes a mathematical value, called phi, that represents a system's level of integrated information. A system with high phi is one where a vast amount of information is woven together, in a way that the whole is far greater than the sum of its parts. According to IIT, anything with a phi value greater than 0 has some degree of experience. The human brain, with its dense and intricate web of neural connections, has an incredibly high phi. A simple organism like a worm would have a much lower phi. A rock, with its simple crystalline structure and minimal internal communication, would have a phi of virtually 0. What's so radical about IIT is that it detaches consciousness from its biological moorings. In principle, any system, be it a complex computer, the internet, or even hypothetically, a sufficiently organized ecosystem, could be conscious. This theory leaves open the astonishing possibility that consciousness is not a fluke of evolution on Earth, but a fundamental property of organized matter woven into the fabric of reality itself. These frameworks, emergentism, panpsychism, and IIT, present us with a profound choice. Is consciousness a temporary flame kindled by the brain, destined to be extinguished? Or is it an eternal fire, and our brains are merely the logs that allow it to burn brightly for a time? The answer to this question changes everything we think we know about our place in the cosmos. Among the most compelling and controversial pieces of evidence in the puzzle of consciousness are near-death experiences, or NDEs. These are the profound, often life-altering events reported by people who have been to the brink of death and back, survivors of cardiac arrest, trauma, or other forms of clinical death. For a long time, these accounts were dismissed as anecdotal, the stuff of tabloids and talk shows. But over the past few decades, researchers like Dr. Raymond Moody, Dr. Bruce Grayson, and Dr. Sam Parnia have systematically studied thousands of these cases, and what they've found is nothing short of remarkable. Despite vast differences in age, culture, and religious belief, the core elements of the NDE are strikingly consistent across the globe. People report a sensation of leaving their physical body, often observing their own resuscitation from a vantage point in the room. They describe moving through a tunnel or darkness toward a brilliant, loving light. Many encounter deceased relatives or benevolent beings of light who communicate with them, not through words, but through a kind of telepathic transfer of pure thought and emotion. A common feature is the life review, where the person's entire life is re-experienced, not as a passive film, but from the perspective of everyone they ever interacted with, feeling the joy and pain they caused others. Overwhelmingly, the experience is suffused with a sense of unconditional love, peace, and the feeling of returning to a place they describe as their true home. From a purely neurological standpoint, there are plausible explanations for many of these features. Science can correlate these events with a brain under extreme duress. For example, the lack of oxygen to the brain, anoxia, can affect the occipital lobe, potentially triggering the sensation of tunnel vision or seeing a bright light at the center of a dark field. The stimulation of a brain region called the temporoparietal junction is known to induce out-of-body sensations. The release of a flood of endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, could create the profound sense of euphoria and peace. The gamma wave surge we discussed earlier could be the neural correlate of the hyperrealistic and vivid nature of the experience. These explanations suggest that the NDE is a final, grand hallucination, a beautifully orchestrated coping mechanism as the brain shuts down, a final act of neural meaning-making. And yet, this explanation, as neat as it is, leaves some profound puzzles unsolved. Why is the experience so structured and coherent? Hallucinations brought on by anoxia or drugs are typically fragmented, bizarre, and confusing. NDEs, by contrast, are almost always described as being more real than real, lucid, and logically structured. Furthermore, how do we account for the cases of veridical perception, where patients report observing details of their resuscitation, like the number of shocks from a defibrillator, a conversation between doctors, or the presence of a specific medical instrument that they could not have known through any conventional sensory means, as they were clinically dead with no brain activity? Let's step away from the abstract and imagine a concrete story. Think of a man, a pragmatic, no-nonsense businessman who has a sudden, massive heart attack. He is clinically dead for several minutes. In that time, he experiences leaving his body, watching the frantic efforts of the medical team below. He feels no fear, only a calm detachment. He is then drawn through a tunnel of light and emerges into a realm of indescribable beauty, greeted by his grandfather, who passed away years ago. His grandfather doesn't speak, but communicates a sense of profound love and tells him, "It's not your time. You have more to learn." He is then shown a review of his life, not as a series of achievements, but through the emotional impact he had on others, the moments of kindness and the moments of impatience. He feels the ripple effects of his actions with a clarity that is both painful and enlightening. He returns to his body with a jolt, just as the doctors are about to give up. He survives. But the man who wakes up is not the same man who had the heart attack. His fear of death is gone, replaced by a deep sense of purpose and a newfound compassion for others. Science can label his experience a hallucination, but for him, it was the most real and transformative event of his life. It has fundamentally rewired his values and his perception of reality. So the question becomes more nuanced. It's not just a matter of, is it real or not? Even if the NDE is a purely biological process, a final sunset of the brain, what does it say about us that our brains are wired to produce such a profoundly meaningful, loving, and transformative experience at the very end? It blurs the line between a final act of brain chemistry and a genuine glimpse of something that lies beyond the veil of our ordinary perception. One of the most profound and consistent themes in near-death accounts, spiritual traditions, and the study of consciousness is the concept of ego dissolution, or the unraveling of our personal sense of I. We tend to think of ourself, our ego, as a solid, continuous entity, a little person inside our heads who is the thinker of our thoughts and the feeler of our feelings. But modern neuroscience reveals that this sense of self is not a single thing at all. It's a dynamic, constantly updated narrative, a story constructed by our brain. A key player in this process is a brain network called the default mode network, DMN. The DMN is most active when we're not focused on the outside world, when we're daydreaming, remembering the past, worrying about the future, or thinking about ourselves and others. It's the brain's storyteller, the neural machinery that links our memories, our perceptions, and our self-reflection into a coherent narrative. The story of me. This story defines our boundaries, telling us where I end and the rest of the world begins. What happens in near-death states, deep meditation, or under the influence of certain psychedelic substances is that the activity in the default mode network dramatically decreases. The storyteller gets quiet. The brain's constant narration of I, me, mine begins to break down. When this happens, the perceived boundaries of the self can dissolve. This neurological process aligns perfectly with the subjective reports of NDERs. They often describe a feeling of merging with the light, of losing their personal identity, and becoming part of a larger, universal consciousness. They report a sense of timeless unity, of being pure awareness without the constraints of a personal name, history, or body. The story fades, and what's left is the raw experience of being itself. This dissolution of the ego is often accompanied by the life review. From a neurological perspective, as the DMN breaks down, the brain's memory centers, like the hippocampus, might fire in a last, cascading surge. This could be the biological basis for a lifetime of moments being experienced at once. But subjectively, it's far more than a memory dump. It is an experience of radical understanding. People don't just see what they did. They become the other person in the interaction. They feel the joy they brought, and the pain they caused with an immediate, visceral empathy. It's the ultimate lesson in interconnectedness. A final, profound realization that the separation between self and other was an illusion all along. This process from the outside might look like a system failure, a brain breaking down. But from the inside, it can be experienced as a profound liberation. Our ego, while necessary for navigating the world, is also the source of much of our fear and suffering. It's what makes us feel separate, vulnerable, and afraid of our own mortality. The idea that death might not be an annihilation of the self, but a gradual, peaceful unraveling of the ego's story, is a deeply comforting one. It suggests that we might not be the protagonist of the story, but the story itself. And when the story ends, the awareness that was reading it doesn't disappear. It is freed from the confines of that single narrative, free to merge back into the universal library from which all stories arise. It's a transition from a personal, identified consciousness to a state of pure, non-personal awareness, the drop of water returning to the ocean. As we venture further into this mystery, we must leave the familiar territory of biology and enter the strange and wonderful world of fundamental physics, where our common-sense notions of reality begin to break down. Physics offers a completely different and potentially revolutionary lens through which to view the persistence of consciousness. At the heart of modern physics lies a principle as fundamental as the conservation of energy, the conservation of information. This principle, a cornerstone of quantum mechanics, states that information, at a fundamental level, can never be truly destroyed. It can be scrambled, rearranged, or transformed, but the raw data that describes a system can never be erased from the universe. Think of a book. If you burn it, you've destroyed the story in a practical sense. You can no longer read it. But the information that constituted the book is not gone. It is encoded in the complex patterns of the smoke, the ash, the heat radiated into the room, and the light from the flames. A sufficiently powerful supercomputer could, in principle, reverse the process and reconstruct the original book from that scrambled data. The information persists. Now, apply this to a human being. Your brain and body are an extraordinarily complex repository of information. Your memories, your personality, your unique web of knowledge and experience. All of this is a pattern encoded in the structure and state of your neural connections and your DNA. When you die and your body decomposes, that physical structure is lost. But what happens to the information? According to the laws of physics, it cannot be erased. The pattern that constitutes you disperses, its information scrambled and returned to the wider universe, but it is never truly deleted from the cosmic ledger. Your existence leaves an indelible informational signature on the fabric of reality. This idea leads to even more speculative, but deeply intriguing, theories that link consciousness directly to the quantum realm. One such theory is orchestrated objective reduction, or CoR, proposed by the physicists Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. This theory suggests that consciousness doesn't arise from the classical firing of neurons, but from much deeper, quantum-level processes occurring within the microscopic structures inside neurons called microtubules. Microtubules form the internal skeleton of our cells. Orkor proposes that they act as quantum computers, where quantum information can exist in a state of multiple possibilities, a superposition, before collapsing into a single definite reality. It is this continuous process of quantum collapse, orchestrated by the brain, that the theory claims is consciousness. If a theory like this were ever proven to be true, the implications would be staggering. It would mean that consciousness is not a biological phenomenon, but a quantum one. It would operate on a level deeper than classical biology, a level that is intertwined with the very fabric of space-time. And the rules of the quantum world are bizarre. They allow for things like entanglement, where two particles can be linked, instantaneously affecting each other, no matter how far apart they are. This opens the door to the idea that our individual consciousness might not be entirely confined to our skulls, but could be part of a larger, non-local quantum field. Its essence, as quantum information, might not be truly erased upon death, but could persist in the quantum foam that underlies all of reality. This is, of course, highly speculative, but it shows that when we look at the question of death through the lens of physics, the idea of complete annihilation becomes less certain. If information is conserved and consciousness is fundamentally linked to the quantum nature of the universe, then the end of our biological life may not be the end of our existence in its entirety. As we stand in the 21st century, the rise of artificial intelligence and computational neuroscience forces us to consider a new, technological path to an afterlife, digital immortality. This concept, once the sole domain of science fiction, is now being seriously discussed by futurists and scientists. The idea is to achieve mind uploading, a process where the entire neural map of a human brain is scanned, neuron by neuron, synapse by synapse, and replicated onto a digital substrate. Imagine a future where this is possible. A perfect one-to-one simulation of your brain is created, capturing every memory, every nuance of your personality, every thought pattern. This digital mind is then activated in a powerful computer or a virtual reality, effectively allowing you to live on after your biological body has failed. You could explore virtual worlds, learn endlessly, and exist for eons, free from the constraints of physical decay. On the surface, this presents a materialist path to immortality, one that doesn't require any appeals to the supernatural. If consciousness is simply a complex pattern of information processing, as emergentism suggests, then replicating that pattern should replicate the consciousness. However, this tantalizing possibility raises a profound philosophical puzzle known as the continuity problem, or sometimes the teleporter problem. Let's conduct a thought experiment. Suppose the mind uploading process is non-destructive. Your brain is scanned, and a perfect digital copy of you is created and activated in a server. Let's call this copy Digital You. Now, Digital You wakes up in the virtual world. It has all your memories. It feels exactly like you. It believes it is you. But you, the original biological person, are still standing in the scanning room, watching the screen. What happens next? Would your stream of consciousness, the first-person perspective you are experiencing right now, transfer to the digital copy? Or would you simply have created a new separate consciousness, a perfect replica, a digital twin that thinks it's you, while your own awareness remains firmly rooted in your biological brain? Most philosophers and neuroscientists who have considered this problem conclude the latter. Consciousness appears to be a singular, subjective, and unbroken stream. You can't simply copy and paste it. The act of creating a perfect replica would likely result in two independent conscious beings. The original you would eventually die, and your first-person experience would end. Your digital twin would live on, carrying your legacy and memories, but it wouldn't be you. This thought experiment is incredibly important because it reveals a deep flaw in the idea that consciousness is only information. It suggests that there is something essential about the continuity of our physical being, the uninterrupted stream of awareness tied to a specific body. It implies that consciousness is not just a pattern, but the experiencer of the pattern. The copy might have the same sheet music, but does it have the same musician? The copy problem forces us to confront the possibility that awareness is more than just data. It is a subjective, private, first-person phenomenon that cannot be duplicated or transferred. Even if we could create a perfect simulation of a person, we might only be creating a philosophical zombie, a being that acts conscious, talks conscious, and has all the right memories, but has no inner experience, no spark of awareness inside. The dream of digital immortality might be just that, a dream of creating perfect ghosts, while the original soul fades away. Let's zoom out, way out, beyond the brain, beyond the body, beyond our planet, and look at the vast cosmic arena in which our lives unfold. When we do, we find that our very existence appears to be written into the laws of the universe itself. The fundamental constants of physics, the strength of gravity, the charge of an electron, the expansion rate of the universe, appear to be exquisitely and probably fine-tuned to allow for the existence of stars, planets, complex chemistry, and ultimately, life and consciousness. If any of these values were just a tiny fraction different, the universe would have been a sterile, lifeless place. This is known as the anthropic principle. In its weak form, it's not very controversial. It simply states that we observe a universe capable of supporting us because, well, if it weren't, we wouldn't be here to observe it. It's a selection bias. But some physicists and philosophers have taken this idea much further, into the realm of the strong anthropic principle, and the participatory universe. One of the pioneers of this thinking was the legendary physicist John Archibald Wheeler, a contemporary of Einstein. Wheeler looked at the strange rules of quantum mechanics, where particles seem to exist in a fuzzy cloud of probabilities until they are observed, at which point they collapse into a single definite state. He took this to its logical, cosmic conclusion. Wheeler proposed the participatory anthropic principle, the radical idea that observers' conscious beings are not just a passive audience to the cosmic drama. They are necessary to bring the universe into definite existence. In this view, the universe, in its earliest moments, existed as a vast ocean of quantum potential, a realm of infinite possibilities. It is only through the act of observation, by conscious beings like us, looking back through our telescopes and across time, that we collapse the waveform of the universe's history, forcing it to become the single, concrete reality we experience. Think about that for a moment. We are not accidental byproducts of a meaningless universe. We are fundamental participants in its creation. Our consciousness is not an afterthought. It is the mechanism through which the universe becomes aware of itself, the tool through which potential becomes actual. In Wheeler's own poetic words, we live in a self-excited circuit. The universe gives rise to observers, and observers, in turn, give the universe its reality. If this perspective holds any truth, it completely reframes the meaning of death. If awareness is woven into the very fabric of the cosmos, a fundamental component of reality, then an individual's death is not the extinction of consciousness. It is the dissolution of one localized viewpoint, one co-creator, back into the universal, underlying field of potential. The universe doesn't lose the capacity for awareness. It simply loses one of its countless windows of perception. Our individual life is one channel through which the universe experiences itself. When our channel goes silent, the cosmic broadcast continues, expressing itself through other forms, other lives, on this planet, and perhaps countless others. Death, from this majestic perspective, is not an ending, but a kind of homecoming, the return of a single, precious viewpoint to the cosmic source from which all viewpoints arise. Of all the things we take for granted, our experience of the flow of time is perhaps the most fundamental. We feel ourselves moving relentlessly forward, from a fixed past, through a fleeting present, into an open future. Life is a journey along a one-way street. This perception is constructed by our brain, which brilliantly links memory, our record of the past, with anticipation, our projection of the future, to create the seamless illusion of linear progression. But what if this flow is just that, an illusion? A quirk of human perception? Here again, fundamental physics, specifically Einstein's theory of relativity, offers a mind-shattering alternative. Relativity unites space and time into a single four-dimensional continuum called spacetime. One of the consequences of this is a model of the universe known as the block universe. In the block universe model, all of time, every moment from the Big Bang to the final heat death of the cosmos exists simultaneously. The past, the present, and the future are not distinct states that come into being and then fade away. Instead, they are all equally real, laid out as a permanent, unchanging landscape. Time doesn't flow like a river. It's a frozen river, a solid block. Your birth, the moment you are reading this, and the moment of your death are all just different coordinates in this four-dimensional block of spacetime. So why do we experience the flow of time? The analogy often used is that our consciousness acts like a spotlight, moving along this timeline of our life. It illuminates one moment or frame at a time, creating the subjective experience of a sequence of events, a past, present, and future. But the film itself, the entire movie of your life, exists all at once. Death, in this model, is simply the point where the spotlight stops moving. The last frame of the movie is illuminated, and then the light goes out. But and this is the crucial part, the film is not destroyed. The entire story of your life, every single moment of joy, every sorrow, every breath you ever took, every mundane Tuesday afternoon, and every magnificent sunrise, remains eternally inscribed in the fabric of spacetime. From this timeless four-dimensional perspective, nothing is ever truly lost. Your existence is a permanent and indelible feature of the history of the universe. The experience of you might end, but the reality of you is eternal. This concept radically redefines what it means to die. It suggests that our awareness might transition from experiencing a linear sequence of moments to a state of boundless, eternal presence. Perhaps, at the moment of death, the spotlight doesn't just go out. Perhaps it expands, illuminating the entire film of our life at once. This aligns with the life review phenomenon, where a lifetime of moments is perceived in a single instant. From this perspective, death is not an erasure, but a transition to a timeless view of our own completed existence. We have journeyed from the final spark of a dying neuron to the vast, timeless expanse of the cosmos. We've explored the brain as a generator and as a receiver, weighed the evidence of near-death experiences, and considered the possibility that our very consciousness is what brings the universe into being. So, where does this leave us? We are left standing before the ultimate mystery, armed not with a single simple answer, but with a profound set of possibilities. Science reveals with near certainty that the biological structures that sustain our individual self, our body, our brain, our ego, will dissolve. The personal story of you will come to an end. Yet that same science also hints that, at a deeper level, nothing is truly lost. The laws of physics tell us that information and energy are conserved. The stranger rules of quantum mechanics and relativity suggest that reality is far more interconnected than it appears, and that our lives may be eternal features of spacetime. Perhaps the most beautiful and unifying way to understand death is not as an annihilation, but as an integration. Think of a wave rising from the ocean. For a brief time, it has a unique form, an individual identity. It travels, it crests, it has its moment in the sun. But it is never, for 1 second, separate from the ocean. It is a temporary expression of the ocean. Death, then, is the moment the wave subsides, its form dissolving back into the vast, boundless source from which it came. The wave is gone, but the water, the fundamental substance of its being, remains. In this sense, the personal story ends, but the capacity for awareness, a fundamental property of the cosmos, continues. The light of consciousness never truly goes out. It simply merges back into the universal radiance that expressed itself, for a little while, as you. So, what is the lesson in all of this? What is the advice we can draw from this grand exploration to apply to our daily lives? The greatest lesson is this: since the ultimate answer remains a mystery, we have the freedom to choose how we live in the face of it. We can choose to live in fear of the end, or we can choose to live in awe of the present moment. If consciousness is a miracle, a brief, glorious flaring of the universe's awareness, then our primary task is to be fully present for it. Live with less fear. The fear of annihilation is at the root of so much of our anxiety. But every perspective we've explored, from the sunset of the brain to the timeless block universe, suggests that the end may be a transformation, not an obliteration. Embracing this mystery can free us to live more boldly and love more freely. Live with more wonder. Pay attention to the magic of your own awareness. That inner feeling of being is the greatest unsolved puzzle in science. Don't take it for granted. Appreciate the taste of your food, the beauty of a piece of music, the warmth of a loved one's hand. Each of these subjective experiences is a clue to the profound nature of reality. Live with more connection. If consciousness is a universal field, and our egos are temporary constructs, then the sense of separation between us is an illusion. We are all waves in the same ocean. Understanding this on a deep level fosters empathy, compassion, and a sense of shared responsibility for one another. The kindness you show to another is, in a very real sense, a kindness you show to yourself. Ultimately, the great mystery isn't what happens after we die. The great mystery is that we are alive and aware right now. Our journey through this life is our one precious chance to be a unique expression of the cosmos. Let us not squander it in fear of its conclusion. Let us live it as a work of art, so that when our time comes to return to the whole, we leave behind a beautiful and complete story, eternally woven into the fabric of everything. And now, I want to leave you with a few questions to carry with you. What do you, in your heart, believe happens when we die? Has an experience in your own life, a moment of profound connection, a strange coincidence, a deep sense of intuition, ever made you question the nature of reality? And if you truly believed that your life was an eternal and permanent part of the universe, what would you do differently tomorrow? Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey to the final horizon. I wish you all profound peace and vibrant health. If these questions and explorations resonate with you, please consider subscribing to our channel so we can continue to explore the biggest mysteries of our existence together.